start then, as Brent said, I happen to be the chair of a group called Mellon. I think the reason that we evolved this group was that there is a huge untold story, really, in the history of medieval Ireland, I suppose, of a population group which emanated from Inishowen and became a political powerhouse in the north of Ireland and much, much further afield during that period. So we've attempted to research and to, I suppose, share with anyone who's interested that story. Part of that, obviously, is the story of the Clandeboye means. And the reason that I want to focus on the rise of the Clandeboye is sadly there was also the demise of the Clandeboye. So their story is too big to go into in one talk, so I split it into two. I'll go through this presentation. Let me know if you're having trouble hearing, or if I'm speaking too quickly, or if there are any other issues, and I'll certainly adjust. This is a big topic. I've tried to distill it down to the key points. But it's a subject I enjoy, so if I start to rattle on a bit, draw me back in again and tell me that I'm waffling. I've got a thick skin, so I don't care if that's the case. It has to be interesting and not bore anybody. I think if you could keep your questions maybe to the end, then we'll keep the flow through here. I'll keep an eye on time as well, because as I say, I could waffle on from now to tomorrow morning on this subject. And if I'm doing so, Dan, especially, you can keep me right here. Dan O'Neill, I'll declare an interest, is a colleague and founding member of the Clandeboye as well. A good friend as well. So we'll try and keep this on track and keep it as informative and interesting. Now, some of you may know some of this, so I kind of assumed no knowledge, and I'll try and take it from there. I'll go as deep as anybody wants. But I want to give enough so that at the end you understand the complexities of the rise of the people who became known as the Clandeboye O'Neills. Of course, much like the Tyrone O'Neills, it wasn't always really the top dog by dint of all the other families who put them and supported them in the position. So for anybody who knows about the structures of Gaelic Ireland, fairly complex, and they went back a long time in the history of the people, and they worked for the people. There are a great many myths I'll try and debunk as we go through this as well about that society. So let me try the page down first of all and see if that works. It does indeed. Okay, so that's the introduction over. Local relevance. Brennan's Historical Society is essentially close to Dungannon and Tyrone. So I would hope that everybody would know the history of the Tyrone O'Neills. And they tend to get Ryan's share of any historical effort, for good reason. They're very, very important grouping. But hopefully by initially you'll see that the Clandeboye were able to rise to a position of power that virtually mirrored that. And they are actually sprang out of the Tyrone O'Neills, and they were always related to the Tyrone O'Neills, but they were always rivals of the Tyrone O'Neills. So we're kind of, if you think of the River Bann as being a geographical boundary right down the north of Ireland, then the Clandeboye are perceived to be those who are east of the Bann, and the Tyrone O'Neills are seen as west of the Bann. Again, historically incorrect as well, and we'll come on to that. A few caveats as well. I would go through this with a very open mind. As I said, we'll debunk some myths. We'll talk about the origins of the Clandeboye O'Neills. We'll talk about internal divisions within Gaelic society. We'll talk about the influence of the Normans on the rise of the Clandeboye. We'll talk about Scots' influence. We'll arrive at what was called the golden age of the Clandeboye O'Neills, when they were at their zenith. And then we'll touch on their demise, but we'll not go there. That's a whole other story. A pretty sad story in some respects as well. But we'll leave that for a movie. So, in the waiting room, I let them in. One of the functions of the chair. So, This is a probably well-known map for any of you into history. It's the superimposition of the sort of power structure around the mid 1500s in the northern part of Ireland here. So if you look, you will see what's called the Great O'Neill and O'Neill of the Fuse or branch. They are generally considered to be the Tyrone O'Neills in sort of common parlance. Um, if you look at the territory of O'Neill of Clandeboye, it's almost as big in terms of landmass. And the first thing you'll see is that quite a bit of it is west of the Bann. We'll come on to the reasons for that. But essentially, all of this area at one point, O'Cahan, the Great O'Neill, O'Neill of the Fuse, and the sort of that sort of South Derry area would have been part of the Greater Tyrone. But the Clandeboye O'Neills grew out of the actual western side of the Bann, what is, I suppose, basically the modern barony of Loch Shillin. And their territory on the western side of the Bann would have extended from the Moyola, which was always a historical boundary, up to Kilray on the Bann, and it would have extended towards the modern boundary, the modern county of Tyrone, in an area called Ballinscreen. In fact, there's a road between Tobermore and Draperstown, if any of you know it, which is called Dundee Bryan, the fort of the houses of Brian. And that, those Brian that's referred to there, is Brian Carrot O'Neill, Clandeboye O'Neill, who was based pretty much at Inishrush outside Port Glenone, but on the western side of the Bann. So that's one of the first historical myths debunked. The Clandeboye O'Neills would have owned that territory, or controlled that territory. They would have controlled the south of Antrim, because at this stage, the north of Antrim would have been divided equally between McQuillan of the Root and the MacDonalds, essentially the Scots of the Glens. He eventually liquidated the McQuillans as any sort of political power. They would have stretched away down into North Down and bordered McGuinness, another very powerful clan. And they would have controlled the northern part of the Ards Peninsula that you can see there. The lower half tended to be the old Anglo-Norman families, such as the Savages and that, who still felt themselves to be in some way English, and never completely transferred across to the Gaelic side. Later, of course, the Savages did during rebellions, but at this point, they weren't entirely Gaelicized. So that's a map that everybody should have seen, and that gives a bit of an explanation. I'm trying my page down here, but it's working. Bear with me a second. That's not a good sign. In fact, my keyboard isn't responding. Okay. All right, I finally got to work off my mouse here. So, I think to understand the rise of the Clandeboye, you have to understand the Tyrone O'Neills. So, there are a number of interesting points that everybody has to bear in mind. Clandeboye is the anglicized version of Clan Eboy, the clan or the family or descendants of Hugh the Blonde. So Eboy is the progenitor of the Clandeboye O'Neills. And in 1167 to 77, Hugh, the lazy Archduke O'Neill, his grandfather, is chief of Tyrone. He's chief of all the Tyrone O'Neills. So, hello? Sorry, okay. And to understand how that comes about, you have to understand that during the period 1053 to 1166, the McLaughlin group, the political McLaughlin group in the King of Loan, had virtually pushed the O'Neills political grouping out of power in the King of Loan. And In fact, the O'Neill Centre Tullahoe outside Cookstown that we associate strongly with the O'Neill dynasty was held for that period in the 1070s by two of the O'Briens from the south who'd been put in to essentially keep control of that district and to split the Kinlow. Hugh the Lazy Arse O'Neill got his name because he refused to stand up when the dominant McLaughlin chief arrived in his foster father's house. His foster father was the king of the Oriela, Donald O'Carroll, and he quietly supported his successful bid to regain the chieftainship of the Kinlow after the death of McLaughlin. So there's a power struggle going on in Kinlow, in Tyrone, between the McLaughlins and the O'Neills. Eventually, we'll come on to this now, but Rory O'Connor, the High King of Ireland, had to come up north and arbitrate between these two parties, the O'Neills and the McLaughlins. And he basically divided the territory. And he said McLaughlin's territory is north of Sleafgal and O'Neill's territory is south of Sleafgal. So that internecine strife goes on with Kinlow following the death of the Lazy Archduke. But the bottom line is that the internecine strife between the Kinlow and the Tyrone branch of the O'Neills allowed probably the Normans an easier entry into Ulster whenever they decided to come in under de Courcy than would have been the case. He himself had 4 sons, and 2 of them, Niall and Eneth, so that's Red Niall and Fat Hugh, he carried on a bloody rivalry for the succession. And out of that, Niall Rua's line becomes the senior branch of the O'Neills of Tyrone, and Eneth's line becomes the junior branch, which eventually becomes the Clandeboye O'Neills. So the Clandeboye O'Neills are born out of strife within the Tyrone O'Neills. So Eneth, Hugh the Fat, as he's called, eventually ran Tyrone for 30 years. And that's Sleafgal for anybody who knows it. The relationship with the Normans is very important in the rise of the Clandeboye O'Neills. So Eneth is troubled to learn that the newly arrived Norman de Courcy is intending to invade Tyrone. He's just taken over County Down and parts of Antrim, and being an aggressive Norman who's trying to carve out a kingdom for himself, he decides that he'll go on and attack the lands of Tyrone. So Eneth kits out 5 ships on the Foy, goes out of the Foy, round to Old Defeat Castle at Larne, and burns Larne until water to the ground to show the Normans that it's a bad idea to invade Tyrone. He's a shrewd boy, so he knows that the Normans aren't going to stay away forever. So he marries Banmeja, the daughter of the King of Fermanagh, thereby turning instantly his enemy on his other flank into an ally. He then, having secured that flank, turns on de Courcy, defeats him at the Battle of Donegal. So by this stage, Eneth has completely countered any Norman threat west of the Bann. He has secured the lands of Tyrone against the Normans at this point. The Normans, of course, being avaricious and out for themselves, essentially. De Courcy, he's ousted by Hugh de Lacy with the support of the English king at the time. So what does Eneth do? Again, being a clever guy, he instantly allies with the new top dog, de Lacy. So that means that Eneth, from the junior branch of the O'Neills, is now the supreme Gaelic leader in Ulster. So In 1210, again, typically avaricious and Norman style, Hugh de Lacy rebels, and King John of England comes and besieges him in Carrickfergus. What does he do? He's allied to de Lacy. He takes his army and tries to lift the siege of Carrickfergus on behalf of the Norman, Hugh de Lacy. Now, this is important. That relationship between what becomes the Clandeboye O'Neill and that lower branch or junior branch of the O'Neills of Tyrone is one of the reasons that the Clandeboye are successful. And you'll see this throughout. King John won that battle, of course, but he wasn't that badly harmed. He refused to give hostages and he went back to Tyrone and actually stole most of King John's sheep and cattle and brought them with him. Now, King John of England is not going to stand for this, so he retaliates and forces Ian to pay 300 cattle for Carrickfergus and 321 cattle to be able to call himself King of Tyrone. There you see the power and influence of the Normans in the selection of the top Gaelic chieftain of Ulster. So whoever wants to be top of the O'Neill clans of Tyrone needs to have the support of the Normans at this time. De Lacy himself was exiled, and then the King of England put in sort of his justiciars to run Ulster. He thought, some of these guys that I had in here before got too big for the boots, that's not going to happen again. But de Lacy returns. And what does he do? He rejoins him and he attacks the Normans all over Ulster, but specifically in Coleraine. And he also made a deliberate point of attacking the King's Scots, as they were called, McCautreys, etc., from Galloway, who were residing in Antrim. So again, he's back to winner. Emeth has backed de Lacy, and de Lacy is now again the Earl of Ulster. So he actually died of natural causes, which is very unusual at that time. And it's important to note what Emeth, the sort of grandfather of Ebwy, is described as in Ellis. They record him as the defender against the Gauls. The Gauls here are foreigners, as in Normans. He's a prince eligible to jury for kingship of Ireland. So the people of Ireland regarded him as almost their high king at that point. He had enough power to be thought of in that respect. He never gave pledge or hostage or tribute. Now that's important. In Gaelic society, in order to keep the peace, you gave somebody hostages if you were beholden to them. If you weren't beholden to them and you were their equal, i.e. equal to the Normans, you didn't give them any hostages. So he's perceived to be as great as any of the great Norman lords about at the time. He wrought slaughterings in great rout of the Gauls, the Normans as well, and he did defeat them militarily on several occasions. He was the support of any Gaels who were in banishment or homeless, the most generous and excellent of all men of Ireland who ever lived. So Emeth, one of the progenitors of the Clandeboye, is that well held in regard in Ireland. So, there you are. That's what your average Gaelic warrior would have had to face in those days. Dolo is another very interesting character in the line of the Clandeboye. He's the father of Ebwy O'Neill. Ebwy gives rise to the name Clandeboye. Ebwy is blonde hue. So Dolo was titled as the King of Mellon and the King of Ulster. Strangely, despite all the internecine strife, Dolo and Cicely McLaughlin were married. So, political marriages at that time, the female relatives of powerful Gaelic chieftains, much like anywhere else in Europe, were used as bartering chips in political alliances. They often ended up on the other side of warfare with their own family. Some of them were married maybe 4 or 5 times because their husbands, the Gaelic chieftains that they were married to, Well, one, in Brehon law, you could give your wife or husband up, but two were very often killed in battle. So then they were, I suppose, packed off to the next eligible powerful chief. Um, in some cases, not much of life, but the influence of these royal women is very, very underplayed in history, and it doesn't have its direct. And it's an area where somebody could do some research. So, John Logue O'Neill is the son of Ine, and the grandson of the lazy archduke. But he, most importantly for our story, John Logue is the father of Nico, fair-haired Hugh, the founder of the Clandeboye O'Neills. So you can see the line there. The lineage is very much through the King of Owen, through the Tyrone O'Neills, but also through the McLaughlins, their powerful political rival. So at the death of Ine, the McLaughlin branch of Tyrone challenged for control of Tyrone, but they're soundly defeated by Donal Logue. They misunderstood Donal. I think what they thought was that because he's married to Cicely McLaughlin later, that he, there was some weakness there that they could exploit. But this internecine strife between the McLaughlin and O'Neill parties continues. The marriage is not enough to stop it, if that was the intention. And basically, they spend the next several years fighting. For example, in 1234, Donal Logue deposed and killed by the McLaughlin faction, despite being married to Cicely McLaughlin. So it didn't save his life. And that's the way those kind of alliances worked in the medieval world. This is just a photograph of a very famous book called The Lure King of the book of the Clandeboye O'Neills. Let some more people in there. We'll try and page down from here. My controls aren't working very like they should do, I think, on this. Seems to be it seems to be when I admit somebody to the room. So once Donal Logue O'Neill is deposed and killed by Donal McLaughlin, the McLaughlin faction within the King alone take over again. In 1238, Hugh de Lacy, and here's the importance of the Normans in enabling the rise of the Clandeboye. Hugh de Lacy, Earl of Ulster, deposes McLaughlin in favour of Brian O'Neill. So even though the O'Neills are the top Gaelic clan in Ulster at the time, the Normans have enough sway to depose one of them in favour of another. The internecine strife between the McLaughlins and the O'Neills ends for the McLaughlins disastrously at the Battle of Camergate in 1241. Now, the site of that battle is disputed. It's claimed by 2 or 3 sites, including my own part of the world up near Slaughtneil. So we're not really 100% sure, but what we are sure is that 11 chiefs of the McLaughlins were killed at that battle. So their top echelons were wiped out. Now, it's interesting to note both the power of the Normans in shaping the Clandeboye and the fact that this internecine strife within the King alone, who were the only people who could oppose the Normans at the time in Ulster, allowed the Norman earldom of Ulster to grow unchecked. So there's a list there of the abbeys and towns that the Normans set up in the County Down and Antrim areas. And that's important because that is a power base where they could have garrisons, fleets, etc., and extend their control into Tyrone if they so choose. Now, 1 year after the disastrous Battle of Camergate, the O'Neills are in power. They've defeated their internal rivals. Hugh de Lacy, that they depended on and that were allied with, the normal Earl of Ulster, he dies. Now, he is one of the major power brokers, and again, the English king thinks enough of these strong men. Now's my chance to rule remotely from Dublin Castle by um, the use of these justiciars, who are more likely to toe the line as described from London. Let me let some people in here, and I hope I don't lose my page down a little bit. Okay.
Right
So,
there.
yeah. All right. So, the death of Hugh de Lacy, there's a bit of calm. The justiciars get a bit above themselves. So Brian O'Neill comes across from Tyrone and decides he teach them a lesson. Um, they've been extending their power sneakily with no benefit to him. So he actually flattens the justiciars castle by Bay, County Down, crosses the Bann, and burns and pillages the lands on the plain of Down. Now, this is a big statement by the O'Neills of Tyrone. Um, and what um, all the Gaelic chiefs of Ireland do as a result of this is that in 1258 they proclaim Brian O'Neill High King of Ireland. And that is one of the pinnacles of O'Neill power. So Brian himself forms a great confederacy of the Gael, Irish and Scottish to throw the Normans out. So he has this big plan that the Normans are now weak because de Lacy's gone. The people have turned against the King of England's justiciars. He's struck at them and they haven't been able to strike back. So he and his allies pulled together a huge army to meet the King of England's Lord Justice Stephen de Longspee and his Irish mercenaries. It's very important. The bulk of this Norman army are Irish from the Pale. Brian had a huge army, should have won, didn't. At the Battle of Downpatrick, Gaelic Ireland suffered one of its worst reverses in history and lost a huge number of leaders. Now, Eebwy O'Neill is the cousin of Brian, and that's important because Eebwy survives this battle, Brian does not. Now, the history between Brian O'Neill and Eebwy has already gone wrong because by 1259, assisted by the O'Donnells of Donegal, Eebwy, blonde-haired Hugh, has already begun to plot quietly against his own cousin Brian. 1 year later, however, Brian Cahan means who fell at the Battle of Down. It's succeeded by Eebwy. So Eebwy has got his chance. He didn't need to bring Brian down. Brian was brought down by defeating battle against the Normans. So Eebwy becomes the chief of the King alone. 1 year later, he's actually deposed by his own brother, Niall Cuileann. And that happened in Gaelic Ireland, it happened in Tudor England, it happened all over Europe. This is the way the power played out in those days. So Eebwy, who plotted against Brian, thought he got the main job, and 1 year later, he's deposed his own brother. 1 year after that, he turns around and deposes Niall Cuileann, his brother. So this is how twisted and contorted these tales of power can be. They're got more ingenious maybe sometimes in Game of Thrones. And I think part of Game of Thrones is based on somebody must have had done a study of Gaelic society. But in 1263, Eebwy, who's been in power for 1 year, revives Brian's great idea of a confederacy to throw the Normans out of Ulster. So this shows you the belief that the man had. So Brian had shown him what was possible. He actually plotted against Brian, but he thought, Brian has a good idea here. In order to extend the power of the O'Neills in Ulster, we'll throw the Normans out. They're weak now, so he sends an ambassador to King Magnus of Norway and offered Magnus the high kingship of Ireland if he would help overthrow the Normans in Ulster. That's a pretty bold and confident move, and it mirrors what happens later when they offer the High Kingship to one of the Bruces if he come and throw the English out of Ulster. So Magnus of Norway had his hands full at the time. The Vikings essentially, the Scandinavians, had a huge sea empire at that time, but it had its own problems and infighting. So timing did not suit. So what does Ebwe do? Again, like most of these guys, he's a canny political operator. He and marries Eleanor de Nangle, who's the cousin of Walter de Burgh, the Norman Earl of Ulster. So he plotted to throw them out, offered the kingship to the King of Norway. King of Norway refuses. He turns right round and marries into the most powerful Norman family in Ulster. So he has turned his enemies of yesterday into his friends of today. What it does for Ebwe is it secures peace in Ulster, an alliance with the Normans. The Normans won't attack him, so his position is now stable and secure. Unfortunately, Walter de Burgh dies, as is the way, and he's succeeded by his son Richard de Burgh, who's called the Red Earl. And the reason I'm focusing on the Normans here and the relationship with the Clandeboye, it's really important. Without the Normans, there would have been no Clandeboye armies, either fighting against them or fighting for them. And as we'll see, when the Normans actually disappear later, the Clandeboye are able to fill that vacuum. So there's divisions within the King of Lowen and also within the Norman earldom, so the period of peace ends. Ebwe, the O'Cahans, who were mentioned earlier, were one of our guests here, and some of the Demandables attacked Carrickfergus, but they were repulsed by Hugh Bissett and Ebwe's own brother that he had deposed, Niall Cullen. So you can see how the politics of this works out. To show the impact and power of Ebwe, his men were able to destroy 5 houses, by which they mean Norman houses, castle houses, 3 mills, which were essential to the Norman economy, and 2,000 cranocks of corn, which is a huge amount of grain. He then attacked William Fitzwarren, the Norman seneschal, or sort of king's man in Ulster, and killed 200 Normans. That's a lot for a battle in those days, and would have been regarded as a slaughter and something that would need to be paid back. But he went and swung to the west and attacked his former allies, the O'Donnells. So with the Norman knight, Thomas de Mandeville, he spun round, attacked his former allies, the O'Donnells, at Desert Crate. The O'Donnells had previously helped him plot against his uncle and actually supported his claim to Chiroan. So again, that's the politics of the day. Somebody's your friend and ally today, but your enemy tomorrow. Ebwe was able to rule Chiroan, and this is important. He ruled Chiroan. He was the chief of the Chiroan O'Neills for a combined total of 21 years. He is, however, the progenitor of the Clandeboye. So in 1283, he's killed by the men of Oriel and Fermanagh, which is essentially Armagh and Fermanagh. In 1283, because again, he's extended westward and smacked the O'Donnells. He's descended south now and tried to subjugate Oriel and Fermanagh. How is he thought of by Ireland at the time? Hugh O'Neill, the fair Prince of Tyrone, the head of the generosity and valour of the Irish, the most distinguished man in the north for gifts and for wealth, the most dreaded and victorious of his house, and worthy heir to the throne of Ireland, was killed by Bernard MacMahon. So, well thought of, and again, potentially High King of Ireland. So, to summarise, Ebwe represented the junior branch of the O'Neills and Tyrone, not the senior branch. For 60 years, Tyrone had suffered from this contest between the senior and junior branches of the union. He was succeeded by his cousin Donald of the senior branch. This was opposed by the Norman Red Earl and by Hugh's brother Neil Cullen. Donald in 1286 is deposed by the Red Earl in favour of Eebwee's brother. Again, deposed by a Norman Earl. So again, the Normans had the power to subjugate the senior branch of the O'Neills and put in place the junior branch of the O'Neills, the Clan Eebwee. Back to my point, there wouldn't be a Clandeboye if it wasn't for the Norman. In 1290, Donald, of course, returns to Tyrone and boots out Niall Cullen. Then he kills him. So that is Eebwee's brother killed. In 1291, the Red Earl and Eebwee's eldest son, Brian Wee, deposed Donald. But then Donald turns around and kills Brian Wee of the Clandeboye at the Battle of Clandeboye. At this point, because of all the strife and because of the threat from the Clandeboye line, the junior line of the O'Neills, Donald actually moves his capital from Tulliflow, the place we all know, to Dungannon and builds a castle. And there's the local relevance. Donald is forced by the strife between the senior branch of the Tyrone O'Neills and the Clan Eebwee line to move the capital from Tulliflow to Dungannon. That stabilises things. He's a bit more out of reach of the Clandeboye line, which, if we go back to our map, is based in Lochanchelin, really. It's his power based in Lochanchelin. And he regains the right. So, by 1300, the Clan Eebwee are resident and settled in western Kilitra in Lochanchelin. In 1312, the Red Earl, the Norman Earl, grants Glenconkeen, which is beside Kilitra and Lochanchelin, to Brian Wee's son Henry. So again, the Norman Earl is granting land in Ulster to the Clandeboye line. So if you want to think in local terms here, in the northern part of Ireland, that is Marfelt, Balahi, Castle Dawson, Clady, Desert Martin, Draperstown, in the Shrush, Ray, the Clotham, Mahara, Swatra, Tamlet of Crilly, the Loop, Tobermore, and Upperlands. That is a sizable Gaelic estate. So we now reach a position where the Clandeboye line, by one means or another, have taken control of all of the barony of Lochanchelin west of the Bann. But they cannot move any further west because the senior branch of the O'Neills of Tyrone control all that land and they're formidable. So they have to look eastwards across the Bann for expansion, and their desire to expand coincides as the Norman earldom begins to fracture. So you have a position where the Normans have greatly assisted the rise of the Clandeboye, but now suffer their own internal fracture, and the Clandeboye are going to turn around and take advantage of that. And they're going to move east across the Bann, and it happens obviously before 1300, but it really begins its momentum in the early 1300s. So in less than a century, you have the junior line of the Tyrone O'Neills, such a power base and so many numbers that they basically have to expand east across the Bann into counties Antrim and Down. So again, that's Lochanchelin, and it's pretty much a breakdown of the townlands of the areas of the control. So Donald O'Neill helps Edward I against the Scots in the 1300s. Scotland is bidding for independence. Um, the likes of William Wallace and Murray appear at this time. So that is a problem for Edward I of England. He sends to Ireland for levies, and the Gaelic chieftains help him, whether out of tokenism to keep on his right side, or whether they were genuinely committed. You can make your own mind up. I have my own view that they weren't committed to him at all. But if they didn't help him, he probably would have turned him in. However, as the Bruces became, Edward Longshanks dies and his son is weaker, and the Bruces make progress in terms of driving the English out of Scotland. So Donald O'Neill's clever enough. Donald O'Neill says, I'm going to ally with these Bruces here and I'm going to cause the English problem. So in 1315, Donald invites Edward Bruce, the brother of Robert Bruce, to become High King of Ireland. Edward Bruce lands 300 ships and 6,000 battle-hardened veterans at Larne. The Red Earl opposes Edward, of course. The Normans in Ulster are going to oppose the brother of the King of Scots, but he very heavily defeated in the Battle of Connor. He was in Connor and Gales. So Edward the Bruce and his Scots throw all the remaining Normans out of County Down and the Ards Peninsula. And that's important because that's the territory that the Clandeboye knew very quickly enter. 1316, Edward the Bruce is proclaimed High King of Ireland at Carrickfergus, of all places, by Donald O'Neill. 12 other senior Gaelic chiefs, Robert de Bissett, who is himself a Norman, and the Antrim Scots. Doesn't go well for the Bruces in Ireland. It's pretty disastrous, really. One thing after another. Disease, famine, and looting, to the extent where Gaelic Ireland is glad to see the back of them, actually. So by 1318, Edward the Bruce is killed at Dunfermline and owns a fort near the dock, and Ireland actually rejoiced at this point. Thought it was a good idea 3 years prior, not such a good idea whenever they saw how it worked out for the Gaelic people of Ireland. That actually is Edward the Bruce's tombstone and grave at Fort. So if you ever get the chance to go and visit it, he's the brother of Robert the Bruce, the famous Robert the Bruce of Scotland. So, given what they're seeing and the devastation and the depopulation and the famine and the disease, a lot of empty land, 1318 to 1482 is the period when Clandeboye cross the land in huge numbers and take over the land of Antrim and Down. So, Donald O'Neill himself was blamed for the destruction of Gaelic Ireland in the Bruce War. And he was opposed by Richard de Burgh, the Norman Lord, and the junior branch of Clandeboye. So Donald O'Neill is the Tyrone O'Neill branch. He gets the blame for asking Bruce across and what ensued. So the Clandeboye branch and the weakened Normans turn on Donald. De Burgh still has enough power to expel Donald, kills his chosen successor, and installed Henry Wee, grandson of Wee, as king of all Tyrone. So again, another Norman knight has interfered in Gaelic politics and chosen and installed the top Gaelic chieftain in Ulster of the Clandeboye line. Donald, of course, was only expelled, so he comes back quickly and reigns until 1325 and pushes Henry Wee out. Among the Normans, the Red Earl died, and his son, the Brown Earl, was still powerful enough to force joint sovereignty between the senior and junior branch. So at this point, you have the unusual situation in Gaelic Ulster where you have the Tyrone O'Neills run monthly by Henry Wee of the Clandeboye branch and E. Rower of the main dominant Tyrone branch. So Blonde Henry and Portly Hugh are ruling at this point together. From a Norman point of view, there is a disastrous event that signals their destruction in Ulster and their withdrawal. So the Brown Earl in 1333 is murdered by Robert de Mandeville at Belfast. Um, there's attrition, murder, conspiracy, and the Norman earldom shrinks and implodes at this point, and hangs on only by dint of absentee landlords and only around Carrickfergus. Carrickfergus is important to all of Gaelic history and all of the history of Ireland because it is a port to which invaders and the English have always been able to land their forces and control Ulster from there. So Henry is seen as a very powerful king in his own right. The English regard him as one of the Principalities of Ireland, the top man of Ireland. So in 1335, Henry Boye of the Clandeboye Leagues helps King Edward III of England with his Scottish War by sending him men and horses. In 1338, there's a very significant treaty between the branches of the senior and junior branches of the O'Neills of Tyrone, which essentially splits them forever. So from 1338 onward, the Tyrone O'Neills go their own way, and the Clandeboye go their own way. Again, in the contorted history of the O'Neills, in 1344, Sir Ralph Dufford, another Norman, expels Henry Boye of the Clandeboye branch to Scotland in favour of his joint ruling king from the main branch of the O'Neills, Ralph. Henry, of course, returns, don't they always, a year later, but he recognises that the days of anybody from the Clandeboye branch ruling Tyrone are over. So at that point, 1345, it's over. 1338, they had the treaty saying it was all over, the marriage was over, and in 1345, they both sets of the O'Neills realised that it is indeed all over. So the Clandeboye and their followers move en masse across into Antrim and the earldom of Ulster, which, don't forget, is included by this stage. So any Norman farmers have gone, any Norman landlords have gone, any Norman soldiers have gone, apart from Carrickfergus. So it's there for the taking. And they cross at Tuam and on at Mazarine. So Henry Boye, son of E. Boye, is the first king of the new Principality of Clandeboye. And I hope at this point that's been quite contorted, but I hope everybody takes away from it the fact that the reasons for the rise of the Clandeboye are internal strife within Tyrone and the junior and senior branches of the O'Neills, the introduction of the Normans into Ulster and the relationship of both those parties with the Normans and against the Normans, the introduction of the Scots into Ulster, and the implosion of the Normans caused by their own internecine strife. And they're the main reasons that Henry Boye is able to bring all his people, more of his people, across in 1345 and rule a new area called the Clandeboye. So they had to displace Norman families. The Normans were no longer able to support, a lot of them left. Whenever the Clandeboye expanded across Antrim and then across the River Lagan, to eventually have their power base at Castlereagh in Belfast, they displaced Norman families, and they're pushing these Norman families into a tail in the bottom of the Ards Peninsula, where you see a number of these names still. White, Jordan, Chamberlain, Copeland, Martel, Riddle. These names are still extant in the Ards Peninsula. Some of them, such as the Jordans, for example, and the Savages, later become Gaelicized and become essentially rebels against English power in Ulster. So they become more Irish than Irish at the time. But the Clandeboye also the resident Gaelic families in Lochanchalin, the O'Lyns, from which the name Lochanchalin derives, um, were subjugated first. The MacDonleave is a very famous medical family. The O'Hirks of Lower Nazarene, um, the McKerneys and the McGees. They pushed the McKerneys and McGees from Tyrone to Ards and Portavogie, and they resettled the Gilmores in Hollywood, Newton Ards as it became, and Bangor. They pushed so hard and fast and subjugated all these people so quickly that Norman influence itself was reduced to a tiny sliver of land from Dundrum Bay to Belfast, and from Antrim to Carrickfergus to Larne and Coleraine. There, the Normans only remaining seaborne beachheads in Ulster. But they're important because they didn't let them go in time. Henry Boy dies in 1347 as the first king of the Principality of Clandeboye, and he's succeeded by his son Brian Boy II. Um, you have E. Flan, Red Hugh, the Clandeboye push on out, and he's very, very victorious against anybody who stands against him. And so the territory at this point in 1350 is South Antrim, North and East Down, and South East Derry. E. Rower of the Tyrone branch sees all this. He's quite jealous. He's quite a proud man, and he thinks, "Hang on a minute, these people are going to rival my power in Tyrone." So he decides he will invade Clandeboye. The first attempted invasion by the Tyrone O'Neills against the Clandeboye O'Neills. E. Flan sends him packing basically in 1354. So he also killed Murto, the friend of Moylinny, which means that all the O'Flynn lands are now his as well. And he banished the O'Flynns to Inishaggy and Kilcubbin from Toom. So that's probably as far as you can go. And the O'Flynns were the last of the old E-Church, the old Gaelic dynasties. So that's the ruthless and how successful the Clandeboye were in pushing anyone who stood against them out into the nether regions of their kingdom. Brian Lee, of course, dies, and he's succeeded by his brother Murtagh, which means long-headed. Probably means, we have a saying here, for those of us who are from outside the country, anybody who's long-headed means wise. It doesn't mean they have a long head. So he lived for quite a long time, as you can see there. He reigned as king for about 30 years. The important thing about Murtagh is he's buried in Armagh, right, which is the cathedral city and the power base of the Tyrone O'Neills. So only really, really important individuals are buried at Armagh. And this shows you how far the Clandeboye have come in their standing within Gaelic Ireland. He was Lord of Carrickfergus, but he didn't actually control the town. He built the town. He had a town built. At Liston-Nagari it's called in the maps, but it's really Lisburn. So Murtagh is the reason why Lisburn exists. And it is the rival to Belfast and Carrickfergus. And at this point, when he dies, he contained Lochanchalin, Toom, Antrim, Nazarene, and Belfast. So at the point, the Clandeboye have extended their power. He's succeeded by Brian Malach, his son, Malach being spreckled. Now, he is regarded as a very cultured man, but also a very good military commander. He has people from all over Europe as his educators, and at his courthouse, if you like, there are scholars from all over Europe. So even though this is Gaelic Ireland, and even though there's conflict, these people are running a fairly sophisticated court on the European style with major and far-reaching European contacts at this stage. So he conquers the rest of Trian Congo and expels the Mulcreevies from the Lagan Valley and Castlereagh down as far as Grimsport in County Down. So again, he sent them packing. 1420, the O'Neill tries to invade his territory again, and he sends them packing. Um, he took Owen O'Neill's prisoner um, because he thought that Owen O'Neill of the main branch, of the Tyrone branch, was about to ally with the English. And Owen's wife had to produce a huge ransom to get her husband back. So Owen O'Neill of the main branch of Tyrone, he doesn't take this lightly. So he formed a great alliance with the Gaels of Ulster, went into Clandeboye, took back all his ransom, and basically put the Clandeboye O'Neills in their place. So he basically bloodies their noses and says, we're still the single branch. We won't do anything like this. In 1424, James Butler, a descendant of the Norman Lord, I don't know, decides that he's had enough and he wants to sort of reinstate English authority in Ulster. And he brings thousands upon thousands of English troops in via Carrickfergus and defeats the Gaels on a number of occasions. He defeats the Royal O'Neills and their allies on several occasions. In fact, in 1426, Ryan is murdered by the peasantry of Carrickfergus. He's simply pulled from his horse and battered to death by farmers, which is a fairly ignominious death. However, the Clandeboye clans and the O'Neills don't take it lying down. It's an insult that their leader has been murdered like this by common folk. So they force the town to pay £40 a year until 1581. That's the power of the Clandeboye O'Neills. They didn't own the town or control the town of Carrickfergus. It was still technically English. But for a period of some 160 years, the English are paying them a fine every year as a punishment for the death of their leader in 1426. So you have a lot of jockeying for power, but very, very quickly after Brian's death, young Edward II gains control. He's a much respected king in his day, and the Primate of Armagh asked him to adjudicate a dispute on the rectory of Breda, showing that Clandeboye controlled Castlereagh and Belfast completely outright. Breda is what's called Newton Breda now, outside Belfast. And to be asked by the Primate of Armagh, who's the holiest man in Ireland, if you like, to adjudicate an ecclesiastical dispute is a sign how far the Clandeboye O'Neills have come. He goes across and defeats the McQuillans of the Root and Henry O'Neill. So the main branch of Tyrone is still politicking, this time on the northern flank with the McQuillans, and the Clandeboye basically teach them a lesson. Henry has to give his son up as a hostage as a result of that reason. He, although he's young, is powerful enough to compel his elder brother, but to handle the spoils of Leah. Now that's unusual in Gaelic society. The eldest brother didn't necessarily inherit the chieftainship. The wisest and most capable was allegedly supposed to do that. But it led to tension. Young E has enough power in the Clandeboye and among his followers to insist that his brother hands over the spoils of a military lead. So his position is pretty secure for him to do that. 1444, he died after the wounds from the Battle of Ivy. So he was brave. He was out there in front. He was a learned man, a good diplomat, but he wasn't afraid to lead when he had to. Now, it's important what they say about him, to be honest. He planted more of the lands of the English in spite of them than any other man in his day. That means that he brought all his Gaelic followers to push the Normans back and handed the land all over to his Gaelic followers. So his son Colin is a natural choice among the Clandeboye. In 1468, he defeats the English of Lakeal at Cave Hill outside Belfast, captures Murderreal, and kills Angus MacDonald and Robert Savage. So, why are they important? Colin O'Neill of the Clandeboye has defeated the English. His uncle, who's politicking against him, Angus MacDonald of the MacDonalds of the Grange, a threat to his north, and Robert Savage, an Anglo-Norman, who is clinging on in the Arts Peninsula. So he has struck out at four types of political enemy and defeated them. Con has castles at Eden Duff Carrick, Belfast, which was a ford across the river at that time, and Castlereagh. Eden Duff Carrick is where Lord O'Neill lives after Amherstone. So that is an indicator more or less of where the Clandeboye first crossed the Bann and set up a stronghold. They moved to Belfast and then they finally ended up at Castlereagh, which is on the hills outside Belfast. In order to make peace, as was the having defeated the Scots of the Glens, he decided to make peace with them, and he married Mary MacDonald, daughter of the Lord of Kintyre. So not only is he making peace with the MacDonalds, they're now his allies. If he needs men from the Highlands and Highlands, he'll be able to get them in a few days. However, Con spends most of his life fighting. You've seen that he had to fight off four different types of opponent there. He fights the McQuills of Dufferin, raids their castle on the island of Skiptrick, and kills their chief Con. That would not have endeared him to the McQuillans, but it shows the ongoing tension in him. He fights with and against the O'Neills of Tyrone when it suits. Henry sees the Clandeboye are engaged on four fronts. So Henry O'Neill, of the main branch of the Tyrone O'Neill, decides to invade Clandeboye in 1476, destroys Con's castle of Belfast. And that's a huge insult, never mind victory. So Con, he's stunned for a second, gathers all his people, and expels Henry right across the Bann again. Now, in revenge, he captures, blinds, and castrates Patrick Savage, the Seneschal of Ulster, after a bloody encounter with him. That is the English king's man in Ulster. And that's what Con has done to him, which is a pretty strong statement. Now, having said that he did all that, blinding and castrating someone, he's also famous supporter of the arts. And when he dies, he's described as the general patron of the literati of Ireland. So there you have the different levels or sides to Gaelic Ulster. Learned, scholarly, ecclesiastical in many cases, but capable of great brutality when it needed. No different from anything that went on in Europe at the time. Con died in 1482, and the poets eulogised him. So again, another chief of the Clandeboye who was well thought of in Gaelic Ireland. So, a quick glance there, folks. So 1,000 years after Niall of the Nine hostages allegedly in Inishowen, the Clan Eadwy has emerged the people in their own right. They're third at this point in political clout terms to the O'Neills of Tyrone and the O'Donnells of Donegal. The modern towns are listed below, and that shows the extent of their territory. So, how did the Clandeboye O'Neills maintain that power? The Clandeboye is made up of what the English call sloots or slaves. These are the component clans. So they have their own territory, but they owe their allegiance to the Clandeboye O'Neills. There's the Sloot Neil, Drumbo, and people who are local to Northern Ireland will understand all of these names. The McGillacreevies, who now have become anglicised to Creedy, the Mulcreedys, who are also anglicised, Henricks, who became Henry, Kellys, Hubricks. Hubric is the first name, and they are that name is died out. Brian Boy. Brian Boy means Brian Boy. Another branch of the O'Neills in Hollywood. Durning, which became Dornan. McQuinn, which became Quinn, McCartaglean, which became McCartan, strangely enough, McEdmonds, McGilmurrays, Brian O'Neill, Charters of Innisharky, again a name that's gone, McClerney's and McGee of Bodevoga. In 1482, then he's an outright control falls to son Neil Moore. So all of those clans that made up the Clandeboye owe their allegiance now to Neil Moore, son of Colin. It's important to emphasise it's a subject on its own, the economy of Gaelic Ireland at the time, but there was a very severe recession in modern terms, caused by a scarcity of salt and soaring livestock prices, believe it or not. So it's not a good time, the time of Neil Moore. And it provokes dissension within the ranks. So in 1490, his cousin Phelim raids his castle at Edenduff Carrick. Now, again, Neil Moore allies with the English of Carrick rebels and defeats and kills his cousin Phelim at the Battle of Rashaka. And with that threat over, he rules reasonably peacefully until 1512. He marries politically and other political marriages the daughter of Tyrconnell, i.e. O'Donnell of Donegal, the joint first most powerful man in Ulster at that time. And he calls himself the royal heir of Ulster. That shows you the confidence that Niall Moore had if he's calling himself that. So this is a theme. The chiefs of the Clandeboye O'Neills have a feeling about themselves. They're not going to be second best, and they believe themselves to be the equal of any other power in Ulster. So Neil has stormed Carrickfergus, which seems to be what the Clandeboye did every so often, and imprisoned the mayor, which again is a pretty powerful statement to make. Despite all this, he's actually a deeply religious man, and he founded the Friary of Carrickfergus. So, again, that's another statement to the English of Carrickfergus, that you may hold the town, but I'm the man setting up the friary out in front of you. He endowed the church at Knock in Belfast with lands and privileges. For anybody who knows where that is, it's bounded on one side by a police station and by Golf Club on the other. Sort of bring them in his end, really. He, again, keeps a sophisticated court on the European model, and he's very much a Renaissance man. Again, the scholarly element to Gaelic Ireland and to the Clandeboye. And they would have had ambassadors in Rome, in Madrid, in Paris, and all the courts of Europe. And the scholars and the people from those courts would have visited Clandeboye. Niall died in 1312, and he's actually buried in his own friary at Carrickfergus, of which very little remains. So he had a 27-year reign, and that is the peak of the Clandeboye O'Neills. He had 6 sons, and that's where the demise of the Clandeboye starts. But the later Clandeboye rulers rule for his time. They're fairly ruthless in the battlefield. They're fairly astute politically. They're also very much in contact with Europe. And they're very much running the court on a European basis that you would have seen anywhere else. So from the period of about 1300 to 1512, they have grown from a hemmed-in junior branch of the Tyrone O'Neills to people who have ambassadors in most European courts and control the territory that we see on the map in the pink. So that's the story of the rise of the Clandeboye. It's contorted. There are a couple of major themes, and in some respects it's a great success story. They should really have got off the ground. There was quite a lot going against them at the time. They rose, they were fairly ruthless in their rise. They took advantage of the political situation and climate as suited them. became a major political force um, in Ulster in medieval times. So that's where I land here. I hope I haven't bored you to death. It is quite a contorted story, but it's important to go through it and tease out all the threads. So I'm happy, if you haven't all fallen asleep, to take any questions at this point.
Thank you, Martin. If anyone has any points of requiring clarity or wants to ask any questions, please feel free to do so now.
Mm-hmm. Don't be shy, because I'll take it and I've made you all go to sleep.
All right, Martin. I would. Am I mute? Hold on.
No,
we can hear you.
Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yep.
No, I'd just like to thank you, Martin, for your talk. It's very informative, and I have no real questions.
Mm-hmm.
I'd just like to say it was very clear. The sound dropped a little bit every now and again, but that's to be expected. But thank you very much for your talk, and if I think of anything, I'll come back to you. But it was, pretty comprehensive and very clear, really. So thank you very much.
Absolutely. It was a succession of rows, counter-ructions, and assassinations, and infighting, and anti-English involvement, and pro-English sometimes, and so it was just a complete, a rather sort of barbaric way to behave. But as Martin quite rightly pointed out, it was the way that things were sorted out everywhere across Europe. Alliances were made when they needed to be, and broken when they didn't need to be. So that's the way it worked. Yeah.
Brandon.
Hello.
Yes, Barney.
Hey, Barney.
Dominic commented, I fitted well into that outfit.
And Boris as well, I guess.
I think what it does show is, first of all, a lot of people don't know that much about the Clandeboye O'Neills. They know a great deal about the Tyrone O'Neills, and it's thanks to some research that's actually been done in East Belfast, in Turris and in East Belfast Mission, by the cohort around Linda Irvine, have very greatly advanced the knowledge of this, and they actually run tours based around Colony in the last of the Clandeboye O'Neills, and they've discovered quite a lot. So it's resurrected an interest across the piece of the Clandeboye O'Neills. Very much a story that was suppressed, I suppose, if you like, because we'll come on to the demise of the Clandeboye, but all of the Clandeboye lands were taken up more than you by two, we'll call them entrepreneurs, Hamilton and Montgomery, who did a private plantation of Antrim and Down. And since all the land was taken off Colin at that stage, by the time he died, I think he only had 26 acres or something to his name. That story, for reasons of the time, was suppressed and hidden away. And it's a very interesting story, and I think only now are people realizing it's a story for everybody, and people are beginning to look into it a bit more, and to research the documentation around it. It's sad that the whole thing just disappeared. This is, like Barney said, you can make a movie out of this, and probably a better movie than half of them are out there. But it is a twisted path of how a small population group managed to rise to that level of power in a short space of time. And you have the usual shrewd operators, you have the usual cutthroats, but essentially they're resilient people because they adapt to the circumstances of the time, and they advance despite what's going on. Don't forget, part of this period includes the plague and the Black Death. So resilient, tough, with strong links outside of Ulster. I think that's the other thing. I think a lot of the history tends to be inward looking and thinks that people then were entirely inward looking because they fought their own cousins down the road, but actually weren't inward looking people at all. They had very strong links across Europe. They had very strong links with England, even though England was their sort of natural enemy at the time. And they had the ability to exploit those things when it suited, which I suppose is what politics is all about. They eventually paid the price. But I finished in the sort of mid 1400s when they were up the Clandeboye and they were absolutely at their peak. And the story of what happened to them is no different from the story of what happened to other major Gaelic families during the Elizabethan stage. So there's some of it is not surprising, and yet a lot of it is not known, I think is the best way to describe it. For me, being from Lochanchalin originally, it's very interesting that they emanated from there, and yet they're never spoken about. And certainly growing up, I would have never heard anything about the Clandeboye O'Neills in that sort of South area, which is a very sad reflection on our education system. But it's our job to try and rectify it and to rebalance the story. And thankfully, there's a lot of authors now and researchers in this field who are piecing together all the pictures and giving it more detail and more color.
Thank you very much, Martin. In highlighting the Clandeboyes, I was wondering if, I see that this year's session is going to be recorded. I was wondering if it's going to be available to the general public through YouTube or some other media.
It will be available on the society's website. So certainly that's why it's being recorded tonight, so that it will be available to anybody who wishes to listen to it at a later date.
Okay, well, thanks for doing that. And Martin, regarding the Clandeboyes, do you have any? Are there any books that are specifically on the history that you're sharing with us tonight?
Yeah, there are, and one of the reasons for sharing it is that the books are actually like hen's teeth. But I'll supply Brendan with that, and you can contact Brendan. I dig out the ISBN numbers, and then that way you can follow up at your leisure and get the relevant books. I understand that one of our O'Neill guests here has maybe written a book. Is it Sean? But I don't know if it's specifically about the Clandeboye. But
No. Well, I think there are two people here that written books. Well, my father did the genealogy of the O'Neills, the ancient royal family of O'Neills, and that's genealogy. But Aidan might say something about his book as well.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Sean. I wrote a book along with my father, Jonathan, about our O'Neill family and the journey of discovery that we've had over the last 40 years. We're off the Tyrone O'Neill line.
Yeah.
And we've tried to tie in our DNA research, which Dwayne has been very helpful with, and Sean on the website to show how that has opened the picture a bit wider for us. And my father's been doing the research on our own family history for a long time. And as like a lot of people, we got stuck around about the early 1800s. So,
yeah, I would recommend Aidan's book. It's a fascinating story and very well done, with a lot of personal insight, and the pictures of the family lines and the history that you had in the area, Aidan, is very good. I'll have to come and visit and see the location when things settle out.
I'm sure you will.
And your book is highlighted on the FTDNA O'Neill project, and I'm certain that you can provide details for people to look at it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's on the project website, which Sean has kindly advertised for us. And but if you know Brendan, probably the best, maybe easiest way is to get it through Brendan if anybody was interested to know more about it. It's a bit broader than just a family history.
Yes.
Yeah. Of course.
And then I'd like to highlight through YDNA and the information that we've done similar to Aiden's effort. There's a strong evidence that several of us that are part of this session tonight are descendants of the Clandeboys. And it's only really come out through doing Y-DNA testing over the past 5 years. And the challenge for the Clandeboye O'Neills and a lot of the Irish families is the lack of solid historical evidence. And for most O'Neill descendants, often there's a brick wall in the early 1800s. Whereas, and that was my case as well, where I could trace back to my great-great-grandfather being from near Oaxaca in County Antrim, but I couldn't go back further. But by doing Y-DNA testing and being able to match with another person who had the history and going back further, there's strong evidence there that we're part of the Clandeboye clade. And there's other people that are part of this meeting. I have done DNA testing through their male relatives, and it shows pretty conclusively that that we're all descendants of the Clandeboys. There's about 30 different people that have done testing and that have the Clandeboye signature from a DNA point of view. And within that, there's 3 subgroups or 3 branches from a DNA point of view. But the challenge is really connecting each of those DNA branches and overlaying it onto the traditional Clandeboye genealogy. And we're getting very close to that, but we need to be able to recruit people that have a documented Clandeboye history. And if we get 1 or 2 people with that documented history, then things will be pulled together. And it's just a matter of time these days because it's advancing so quickly and the interest is there. And I think it's human nature wanting to discover your roots and being able to connect to your history and to know the struggles that our ancestors have done and the victories and how people managed and survived over the years and how it's kind of special that we're here. Gosh, with all the fighting and killing and famine, and it's human tenacity, really, or being very lucky, or a combination of the two.
Yeah, they're both, I think. But Clandeboye means we're very resilient. In fact, the Gaelic chieftains that have come on for so long were pretty resilient people, really. I think Claire Laura Kilgallen's on. Claire, you do a bit of genealogy, do you?
Sorry, could you say that again? I didn't catch.
Yeah, you're into the genealogy thing. You've probably hit the brick wall in the early 1800s syndrome, haven't you?
Yes, I have. There are some estate papers that can be helpful with earlier leases and leases for lives and things of that nature. But then you're really getting into, the registry of deeds, and that's a protracted road to hoe.
Yeah, it is.
It's there, but then you need to be, thinking about all the, if you want to go back that way, then you need to know sort of the land ownership,
Yes.
all the variant spellings to look them up in all the different ways under the people index versus the place index, and then just really slog through it. And the books are, I can't even make how big they are. The books are probably 3 feet tall and 2 feet wide, and they weigh about a stone and a half each. So it's laborious mentally and physically. But some of those are microfilmed, and there is a project for the Registry of Deeds where people are going through microfilms, extracting information and making those extracts available. But I don't see the Tyrone coverage being there right now, but I think that's because it's the interest area. You know, you just need to be if people here started doing it, you would probably start seeing it.
Yeah. Okay. It's always interesting, isn't it, that people much further away are more interested than the people who have it on the It's always the case. I'm always surprised how little our own folk here know about these things. But then it's partly, I mean, we understand how the education system has brought us up here to think and how history has been taught. There is a thing that is because of the politics called cultural appropriation, you know, and that hasn't happened either. And it's led to a great many great religions that need to be debunked and proper research. So we'll keep at it at this end, but are there any more questions from the floor? Because I'm conscious we have an audience here, and I'd like, if you have questions, don't be shy, throw them out there.
I'll just say to Dwayne, we're O'Neills with a fuse. We're keeping an eye on you.
Over all these years, now the O'Neills are actually working together rather than fighting. So,
Dan is very much the Tyrone branch. So,
don't mention my name about fighting. I'm retired. I know too many of these boys on here from days gone by. Might as well just apologise to them all now. No, but getting back to the story, Martin, which I do find interesting, is, you know, you talk for, you know, really you're going through generations of O'Neills, and it looks like, you know, there's disputes and there's wars and this, but really what I got out of it in your story and what you were saying is the longevity of some of these reigns is unbelievable. You know, they're 20 years, 25 years, and within that you have the culture, you have the arts, you have the trade routes to Europe, you have the civilization, the classical, you know, we have all that culture, and above everything else, you have the law, the old Brehon law that everybody abided with. And, you know, that's the richness within all of that richness, you know, the wine trade routes that were coming in from Europe, and you know, these trade routes were, as you know, we were at a professor who was talking one night and said that them routes were held on by the English for many years after. So it's you know, it's a great, you know, people could talk for hours, and it's great about the DNA as well, and really what Sean and them boys are doing with the O'Neill DNA project is amazing. And I would also say to people to, you know, get a DNA test done, and people like Dwayne and that, and I've seen Aidan and Pat's book, and it looks fantastic. And you know, hopefully chipping away at it. You know, I am stuck at my great grandfather, Robert O'Neill, and it looks very much like he was Church of Ireland, which came as a great shock. I wish my father had been alive to tell him. He'd have went mad. But it's chipping away and trying to overcome. And there's plenty of help for anybody who wants. I mean, if you go on to the O'Neill DNA project, people like Dwayne, that will, you know, it's fantastic for any help that they need. So thank you again, Martin.
Yeah. And for anybody who's interested, the Clandeboye site as well has a lot of articles about the O'Neills in general and the Clandeboye especially. So feel free to jump on there. I think Dan's right. History is a habit of focusing in on battles and the result of battles and all that, but the battles aren't the ones that make it. You know, they're not they're easy to hook onto as waymarks, but it's all about the politics, the day-to-day living that went on in between time. And I think Gaelic Ireland had a fairly, because of its political nature, had a very cohesive social system that was able to flex with everything that was thrown at it. And I think that's one to take away from it. And the Clandeboye O'Neills, part of the reason that they originate is expansion and population growth, which is a very positive sign. The growing population forces change, which meant that they were healthy. It meant that they were in control of their society. It meant that the land was productive, but couldn't sustain the levels of population, force people to make choices and to move elsewhere. And that's a theme that runs through this. The displacement of other Irish clans is also something that people focus in on, but that went on all over Europe. When people move, other people have to move in front of them or aside, or else get assimilated. So it's quite possible that people in the Clandeboye area who are called O'Neill are not genetically O'Neill per se, but are the people of O'Neill. So somebody would have said, who are these people over there? They're O'Neill's people. Oh, they're the O'Neills, right? So that's an important aspect. And then because O'Neill is quite a well-known name, it's only people who study it understand the differences. So the O'Neill of the Hughes, the O'Neills around Newton Stewart, the Clandeboye, people tend to lump it all together as one big story. I think it's really important as well that people understand that the Clandeboye O'Neill, we're related to, as well as rivals of, the Tyrone O'Neills. So one would not have existed without the other, because the early progenitors of the Clandeboye O'Neill were also the chiefs of the Tyrone O'Neills. So that linkage is very important, even though they ended up as political rivals. They all came from the same source.
Martin, could you put into the chat the reference that you had for the some background material, please, when you have a chance?
Dwayne, you're on the Kenyon site, aren't you? I might PM you. I have a list of things that might be of interest.
Yeah, I'd be interested in getting the information. Then I can share it with other people that are very interested in the Clandeboye side.
Okay.
Thank you.
Just one final thing. Can I wish Hugo O'Neill, chief of the Clandeboye O'Neills down in Portugal, get well soon, given that he's not well at the moment.
Oh, that's important. Yeah. Okay. Best wishes to Hugo from this group.
Yeah, absolutely. I didn't know he was ill, so wish him all the best.
Yeah. Okay. Folks, any other questions at all? Okay.
I think, Martin, we'll wrap it there. It's 9:45.
All right. We better let people go there.
Yeah. Just as an offline thing, I don't know who I should connect with. First of all, I'm only a Donnelly and a Devlin, but we're in there. In terms of the DNA, I guess I need to connect with somebody to understand, are you just searching on the Y DNA, or are you going through autosomal? Because you're never going to see me or my aunts in your research to contribute to trees if you're only focusing on the men. I'll get off bias. Soapbox there.
Well said there.
Well said.
I think a lot of people have done the autosomal DNA as well as the Y DNA. The problem with the autosomal is that it only goes back about 300 years.
I gave my email address. You can contact me. There are a couple of groups that are using autosomal DNA, and then if they have some matches with male O'Neills, gives them a hint on the connection with their O'Neill surname.
Mm-hmm. It's one of the sort of sad side effects of the patriarchal history, where it's only now that research is being done into the wives and daughters of these men that we're all talking about, and some of them were extremely influential in their own right. So there's quite a bit of research going on at the minute. Hopefully there'll be a couple of books that come out on that that'll enlighten us.
I think, Martin, didn't Jim O'Neill do a good article about the women of Tyrone's rebellion, which was very, very interesting.
But there's much wider stuff going on down this way at the minute, so hopefully we'll see some publications on that. It's the old thing, behind every strong man there was a stronger woman, so we need to get that history out. All right, Brendan, I think you're right. We'll wrap it up here. I hope it was interesting for people. We covered quite a lot of ground, so I hope it didn't bore you or lose you in the teaching. But I think it's important to get the contorted path out, Brendan, if you know what I mean.
It is a contorted story, and you know, there's no easy way of telling it other than the way you've chosen, Martin. But on behalf of the Society, I wish to thank you very much for the talk you gave us, and I also wish to welcome all our new visitors tonight and all our members and everyone else. And hopefully you can join us when we have another talk next month. The subject of that has yet to be determined, but if you keep an eye out through the through our website and the emails, we will inform you in that way. It's just a pity that we have to do this by Zoom all the time, but in many ways, the bonus is that people can join us from afar.
Yeah.
Scotland, England, America, Canada, New Zealand, Australia, wherever, and it's a fantastic facility. So I thank you all again, and wish you all a good night and or good afternoon, wherever it is you are, and thank you all for your input and for staying with us. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Bye-bye.
John,
Have a good one.
Bye.
Good to see you again. Bye.
Martin,
Bye.
can you hear me, Martin?
Edward, yes, I can.
I would like to communicate with you a little bit about the Hans.
Yes,
You said you've done some.
I have. So,
Dwayne and I have drafted a couple of papers on those,
all right.
and I'd really appreciate any feedback you might have.
Certainly. My email is Martin followed by 4 M's.
Martin followed by 4
M's, M from others,
N.
at hotmail.com.
At what?
Hotmail.com.
I still didn't get that.
No, sorry.
Martin 4M's at hotmail.com.
Yeah. Martin followed by 4 M's
Hotmail.
at hotmail.com.
Okay. Thank you very much.
All right. Great. Look forward to speaking to you. Bye-bye. Thanks all.
Thank you. Bye for now. We haven't seen each other, Rita.